Hello, everyone, and welcome to Agulhas Current Affairs, the marine science podcast set in Southern Africa, with me as one of your hosts, Dr. Yanis Kiston of Kikoscopy Media, alongside
Dr. Nelson Miranda of Argonaut Science. And today we are getting sassy.
Indeed, very sassy.
We're getting very sassy today. Well, we're talking about some interesting things that have to do with the fish, which is more your side of the equation, I would think.
Suppose.
But it affects us all, isn't it? I mean, just because you happen to be observing fish very intently, that doesn't mean we the rest of us are not interested in fish at all.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Isn't it?
A lot of people eat fish. Yeah,
A lot of people eat fish.
Very big part of food security in South Africa, a very big part of the economy, the ocean's economy, the blue economy. You can't really not talk about South Africa and in a global sense, in an economic sense, and not mention our fisheries.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are also the Agulhas Current Affairs, and that current, has a big influence on the positioning and the ecology of the stocks, and it's the background environment that makes it possible for us all to have, this amazing resources, this source of life.
Yeah, for sure. But ever since we started collecting these resources, I think at some point we realized that it's not infinite. It's not like the sun, which technically isn't infinite, but the closest thing we probably gets to an infinite resource of something. But harvesting, taking things from the ocean or from the land for that matter, there's a point where you can do too much, in which case you overharvest, as we call it, and you collapse the stock or whatever resource that you're taking for your own need. So the idea of managing these fisheries comes into play, and then doing it in a sustainable manner so that we always can count on this resource till perpetuity, and also try and conserve the entire ecosystem that goes along with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, we've gotten very clever historically. We used to just, get resources out of the ocean by our own power, physical,
just
power.
manpower, like one manpower.
Yeah, and I mean, there's culturally, we know that human beings have been connected to the ocean, have harvested from the ocean for as long as I think human beings existed. But it's been only recently that we've been able to use technology to not only have machines to help us, collect a lot more of these resources, but also the technology to locate and be able to be very effective at just pinpointing where exactly the resources are, so we can get there. And that can be a bit too much. Can be a bit too quick. For the fish to basically it doesn't give them a chance to really recover, if we take too much too soon.
You were telling me, Nelson, about the choices that people have to make, along the chain.
Absolutely, because we have to understand it all comes down to people, really, and the choices that we make. We have a huge influence. And I think this is what we're talking about today. It's about choices and influencing choices. And when it comes to the marine environment and the fish that come from the environment and eventually end up in front of you on your plate, then, there are a lot of people actually involved in that chain, and a lot of those people, everyone has to make a number of choices, and those choices are going to influence whether the fish that you end up eating as a consumer is a fish, that is part of, a chain of choices that is leading towards unsustainable and destructive sort of practices, or on the contrary, it's something that, you're on the side that is working towards making sure that you are not taking too much, and you'll always have fish the next day and the next day and the next day.
Okay, so people are making choices about what they consume, what they harvest, and it's kind of different people along the chain that decide. But how does anyone who's just at the grocery store trying to pick out food like actually decide like what to do without being paralyzed?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many choices already on display, isn't it?
Yeah,
So when it comes to fish that is packaged, right, then you have to have a look at the package. And on that package, there will be information, not just what it is that you're buying, but there will also be information about where it comes from. And this is where the eco labels come in to help, you make a choice. Hopefully, that will be the best choice, right? Because you'll look for a certain type of label, and the labels are designed to be catchy, so that you instantly recognize it. It's like a little brand, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And there will be present somewhere on the box, as well as, of course, the contents and technical information that should always be there about, how much energy, what are the contents exactly, all the interesting
yeah,
stuff that
yeah,
most people
for
don't
sure.
read. Most people don't read
Yeah,
that, but that
yeah.
label
It's like
should
it's
be
like
conspicuous.
ingredients. Yeah, it's
Yes,
like
exactly.
ingredients.
It's like
Nobody
a
really looks at it.
breakdown.
Yeah.
How much energy is that fish?
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't read that. But nearby that, or even in the right on the package, there will be a tiny little label or a fairly conspicuous label, and
Yeah.
this is what we're
Yeah.
talking about today.
Yeah, so usually, or it is possible if you get to two major labels. One is kind of an international label, and the other is a more local
Yeah,
label.
in South
So
Africa, yeah, in South
yeah, yeah,
Africa
in
we
South Africa,
have we have either or even both. It's possible.
yeah.
MSC, right?
Mm,
So what does MSC stand for? Because
yeah,
when you think
yeah.
about the ocean and MSC,
You think
are we
of various
talking?
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
We were laughing about it earlier because
yeah,
what could MSC stand for? Let's see. So Master of Science, and MSC is something that
yeah. No,
um,
first I thought it was the shipping company, the
yes,
Mediterranean shipping company. It was like,
yes, that's right.
why do you want to talk about them right now, Nas?
Why
We're
would
talking
we
about
put? Yeah,
yeah,
that's a different business, right? Even though it
yeah,
has something to do with the sea, of course.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, this is the Marine Stewardship Council, MSC,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's an eco label as well as something that goes beyond just the eco label, and it's one of the oldest eco labels that we actually have in
mm,
existence. But
mm.
today we're going to focus on SASSY because we said we were going to get sassy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
S A
Gonna
S
get
S I.
sassy up in here. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
So
guess
that
that's why.
stands for
Yeah, yeah.
what do you guess?
So
So WWF-SASSI is obviously an initiative by the World Wildlife Foundation, and it's all about sustainability and the harvesting of natural resources to sustainably. So it stands for the South African Sustainable Seafood Initiative. That's
yeah,
what SASSI means, headed up by the WWF. And the main idea is that it is a label that you put on fish products, seafood products, fish products, and there's also like a handbook that gives you a guideline as to okay, this species is currently
yeah,
either being well sustainably harvested, not that well, or like really terribly, and you should not be
yeah,
buying this, right? So
yeah,
there is a traffic light system like in South Africa. At the roads, generally, people
yeah,
will stop at a red light.
yeah,
They'd be cautious at an orange amber light, or they're free to go at a
yeah.
green
At the
light.
green
And
light.
it's similar. It's similar for SASSI.
And my apologies to those who are colorblind. There is also a shading. The shading is different.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but and also we call it robots as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, 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 for sure.
Need more.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but
It's either
also
traffic light
because
or robot,
a
depending
robot,
on who you are.
because,
Yeah,
because you could be at a restaurant. Not everything actually comes in a package, and it's also an awareness. It's all about awareness. What kinds of fish are sustainable to consume. So if you're in a restaurant and you get a plate in front of you, you could actually use a pocket guide or the app, because there's an app for everything, as they say.
Yeah.
And you can actually check, and you can actually get background information about the different species that we tend to like to eat in South Africa.
Yeah, 100%. So if you are intending to go out and eat seafood, it's probably a good idea to either carry the pocketbook, or if you're more tech savvy, have the app available to you. So when you're looking at the menu, you can make more informed decisions about what to eat. Sustainability, because it helps. Like, you might think that like your choice in that moment is not going to have a big impact, but there's a lot of people who are kind of like thinking the same way. And at the end of the day, it's always like a supply and demand problem, right? If there's more demand for this certain species, it's going to incentivize the companies to create more supply, which means they go out and fish more, which means they deplete the stocks more, which makes it less sustainable.
Yeah.
Right. So you, as a consumer, can make a choice on a consumer level as to what to eat. So you can decide how you incentivize these companies to collect resources. So generally, you want to hit the green species.
Absolutely. And I mean, going green, that's why people say going green. And the consumer's choice is the important choice, isn't it? It's the last choice along that chain, which means there's a power there, So to have information behind that choice is just a smart thing to do. It's the smart thing to do for the individual person that is enjoying the the meal, but also the smart thing to do for everyone along the chain, and the smart thing to do for the fish itself, the source, and even the environments, because that chain, in the way we understand and measure and monitor the chain, involves so many steps, and it could start in very surprising places. The fish that arrives in front of you in a supermarket could have already gone all the way around the world as it is caught and then captured and processed and packaged and shipped, and there's a lot of people in a lot of industries that make it possible for us to have delicious meals, and we just want to make sure that this is not at an extreme cost to the environment, because we already are in a position where we need to take sustainable actions. It's the only smart thing to do.
For sure, 100%. I remember when I first started studying marine biology undergrad, honors, I used to carry the SASSI thing around in my wallet.
In the wallet, yeah.
And at one point I realized the simplest thing to do is just not order fish, so I have to bulk up my wallet. So I stopped actually going to fishy restaurants. That's more of a personal choice. I'm not recommending you do that, but it makes it kind of less of a friction as to what you're ordering. If you just don't order fish, then you don't have to look at it. So I went through recently, because I do go to the grocery store and buy fish, but not it's usually either tuna and sardines. So I had a look recently at what the guidelines are now, recently on the app. And I was actually surprised to see that sardines or pilchards are orange or amber. And I was geez, I've been buying sardines this whole time. Didn't realize that they were amber. And also, which is also kind of weird in terms of the way the stock is managed in South Africa, because the stock of sardines is managed together with anchovy, but the anchovy is green. The sardines is orange, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm going to have to rethink my grocery cart now going forward. And what I also saw that surprised me was that tuna, or specifically albacore tuna, is green. So it's actually being sustainably harvested. And I always had the idea that it wasn't. So it was very surprising for me, and like also like as a fish scientist, like oh, I had these preconceived notions. I don't remember where I first heard them from, but obviously it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But now there's like updated information,
Yeah, and
which
it's so
you know,
important to keep up to date
yeah,
because things can change and there's so many factors. And it could be
mm,
that we miscalculated our stock assessments, our predictive models. Like, so we calculate based on what we
mm,
caught. If that's not measured properly, then we have no idea how to calculate things properly. Even though we have some information of how, the fish reproduce and when, their seasons as well that we have to take into account. Um,
mm,
like things can change, and if we make a mistake, then the way we work in South Africa is with what's called total allowable catch, TAC,
mm,
and that's
mm,
based on a few calculations. So that and people need to actually make those calculations, and they need to be done properly for us to have a really good idea what's going on. And that's a difficult thing. It's not a straightforward job. But also, you'd probably, even as a fish scientist, you'd probably be surprised to hear that there are certain fisheries with certain fish that can actually be sustainable. Like fish like sharks, for
yeah,
example, right?
oh,
Uh,
interesting,
so
yeah,
so shark
yeah,
fisheries, right? Normally, and in South Africa, we also have a traffic light system for sharks, and we are on the roadmap to protecting sharks, of course. But
yeah,
elsewhere in the world, there are fisheries based on certain types of sharks, and those fisheries are sustainable by all accounts, by all measurable accounts. And this is
mm,
usually something that can be very surprising to hear.
yeah, 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 for
Um,
sure. It's surprising me right now. Yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely, and
yeah,
it surprised me when I used to work for a company that sort of
mhm,
monitor this sort of thing. But
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's interesting to hear that because that means there's something we can do. There's a
yeah,
big chain. There's
yeah.
a lot of choice and there's a lot of things, and we have tools, and they may not be
It's not,
perfect, and they certainly need to be checked constantly because the world can change very
yeah,
quickly,
yeah,
and the world is changing. But yes, we can. It is possible to have
yeah.
management, continuously improving management.
Indeed, and it's not like totally hopeless. And like you can see it in the guide because there are fish with multiple colors. Like some fish have all three colors, but it's based on where the sourcing is from. Like if you look at
Absolutely.
abalone or parallel, like if you're getting it from recirculating like aquaculture systems where they farm the snails, that's totally fine because that's sustainable, or at least more
Exactly.
sustainable than the poachers going out and like catching illegal amounts of paramount and then selling that in restaurants on the black market or whatever. So
Well, that's certainly
the,
what the eco label is going to promote. It's going to promote
yeah,
agriculture facilities over parallel moon that's harvested through the so-called poaching. And I mean, this is it's a big issue. I mean, we won't go into poaching now, but poaching is not just a good or bad. Even though we have a traffic light system, and it's very
yeah,
useful. We also need to understand that there's a lot of underlying complexities. But certainly, we also need to understand that these eco labels will affect the way we make choices. And certainly, the intent of these choices is to make the right choices for the environment and for people. And that can be complicated, and there's a lot of politics that goes into that. But we won't go obviously into that. We
yeah,
just
yeah.
really want to
Well,
understand a little bit about eco labeling, and also what you could actually develop an eco label at different scales, right? So we talked a little bit about larger scales and even the world, yeah. But you can also develop eco labels for small scale fisheries, and throughout developing countries, mostly around Africa. This is something that we can actually do for ourselves, and it has sort of been done here and there, and it ends up being something similar to the principles behind the SASSY approach, where you have a community of fishers that come together and they compare their assessment of how many fish they've been catching over the period and their knowledge, and this is like indigenous knowledge. and they can then actually say, no, I think for the next season, because it needs to be reviewed, we need to favor these species that it looks like their stock is doing better. And this is like can be informed and helped by scientists and organizations, governmental NGOs. It can be like a collaborative sort of approach, and it's very interesting. And at the end of the day, if you are visiting an African developing country and you're a tourist, you could actually be informed by the locals with like some sort of system and some sort of label that is similar to SASSI, or even SASSI itself, of course. And you can be informed whether you are part of making a choice that's most likely part of a string of choices that are sustainable and in line with
100%.
community interests as well.
For sure,
And
100%. So the I guess the lesson of the day is sustainability good. And we
green
kind of explained. Yeah, green means go, sustainability good, 100%. I'm pretty sure we've covered all the important bits.
Yeah, I think we also need to say something. We need to have fun with this too.
That's what I was getting to. We've covered the important stuff.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about SASSI, WWF-SASSI as a marketing / science communication / conservation / sustainability initiative, and the types of things that they do. The booklet and the app are only two parts, and then there's more. So what else is there, Nelson?
So I thought it was really fun that they come up with a card game. Games, basically. Games are fun, let's just say.
Yeah.
And there's even an online game. And I think we need more development in that front. Don't you agree? I mean, those games are great. But, that's just the beginning. That's the tip of the iceberg. I think these days we learn things by having fun. And there's this idea that you can gamify, sort of information and even learn about your cultural issues and all sorts of things through games. Storytelling really is at the heart of these games. But they've made a start. They've got a card game, and they've got an online game that if you have access to online, you can actually play it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like that shark eating game where like the shark goes around and like eats fish and then gets bigger. But this one is like a submarine, and you're going around and collecting fish information, and you got to avoid like the anchors and like you don't want to disturb the dolphins.
And the ghost nets. Ooh.
And the ghost net. Yeah, you don't want to touch. You don't want to damage your submarine.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it is trying to teach you stuff. Like part of it is that it's not that relatable because like who has like submarines that they go around like doing stuff in. The other is that there are other games like that are probably more fun to play that the general populace would probably go from just a gameplay perspective. We want to go play those games instead of this. I get like budgeting was probably a problem and time, and probably different people had different outcomes that they wanted for this thing. But for me, who's both a marine science and conservation advocate, and also like a lifelong gamer, like having it being fun is the number one thing when it comes to a game. And like the knowledge is more of like a secondhand, like side effect thing, which I didn't really pick up on, but also it probably will improve. Like the first iteration of most things are usually not that great.
Yeah, that's the sense that I get as well. That it's the first iteration, and I think with more engagement, right? We can actually build this up to be something really cool and educational at the same time. But it does tick some boxes. I mean, it's a game that you can run off your internet, tab.
Yeah.
And it's easy to understand, it's easy to play, that the controls are not, So there's a lot of technical side of things that were done so that most people can play this game, which is a good thing, And because communication is a good thing. Communication is important. So even their apps, they come in different languages, which is super important. Not just in English, but in other languages that are official languages. And South Africa. That's a step in the right direction, I think, as well. And then something talking about communication. They are, SASSI are on social media. They are on YouTube. So, and I think, it's there's a number of videos there that are interesting, but there's one in particular which I think is really underrated, which is at the core of what we were talking about today, the chain, and the choices along the chain that are made, and it leads to our understanding of how an eco label may affect, and inform. The chain.
100%. I would think it's like criminally underrated. It's only got
It
like
is.
418 views.
It's got
And
currently
it's something-
418. And it's called
yeah.
Traceability in the Seafood Supply Chain, right? So shall we pop a link in our description?
Yeah.
So that
I think so. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
put it down there, and we'll have a look. But it's definitely go have a look at just WWF-SASSI's channel, because they do explain a lot of this stuff in bite-sized, very well produced videos. Don't know why they didn't get a lot of views. Probably because the marketing was not as good as the production budget. But yeah, have a look and share it out so that people become more aware of this initiative.
So a part of awareness is to have a person that is a brand ambassador, and I believe the brand ambassador is a chef, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
everyone has to eat.
Indeed, and chefs can be very influential in people's tastes. If you think about like Gordon Ramsay and stuff, like it's a very memorable like household name, right? So Chef Zana is I think a fairly popular chef. I'm not in the chef circle, so I don't know exactly, but she does, I think since this time last year, she was appointed as brand ambassador of WWF-SASSI, and part of that is creating recipes using the green species, maybe some orange, I haven't checked, but obviously not the reds.
Yeah,
because that would be terrible. So that you, as a consumer, have ideas of how you can make good food with the green label species, and thereby make the choice to use a green label species, thereby making your choices more sustainable, which I thought was very cool, interesting, and big brain
I think
move
it makes
on
sense.
WWF-SASSI's part.
Yeah, it's like more sustainable, greener, and more delicious. If you can keep the delicious levels up, I think people will get behind that.
Exactly. Because that's part of the demand. You're going to eat what you think is tasty. So having good recipes that make good use of those fish is, I think, genius. And I think, Nelson, that's probably about all that we have to talk about on WWF-SASSI. Hopefully we've explained it well and people understand and people begin to use the guidelines. I think I've learned that I need to stay on track more with WWF-SASSI and consult more often. I thought my hack worked. Meanwhile, it wasn't working the whole time.
I think we try to cover it in a fun way as well. We touched upon some complex issues, and it's really up to us all to learn and keep learning and keep reminding ourselves about the things around us, and especially the things that we consume, that we eat.
Yeah, 100%. So if you want to learn about more stuff like this and other things that we'll be explaining and talking about in the future, you can like and subscribe on the video, rate us on podcast services. You can visit our Twitter at Agulhas Current, our Facebook and TikTok at Agulhas Current Affairs. You can follow me specifically at Geekoscopy on Twitter and other places. What about you, Nelson?
And if you look for Argonaut Science, Argonaut the octopus, then you should find us as well on social media and internet.
All right, well, thanks for joining and cheers.
Cheers.